भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। एकोनविंशतितमे सतिमे विष्णुषु प्राप्य जन्मनि रामकृष्ण इति भुवो भगवान् अहत् भवरं परम्.
Translation in the 19th and in the 9th.
Mataji, do I read the translation?
No, I am reading the translation.
Oh, my name is Vinodi. I was.
Okay, yes, Vinodi Mataji. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry, Indulekha Mataji.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
In the 19th and 20th incarnations, the Lord advented himself as Lord Balrama and Lord Krishna in the family of Vrishni, the Yadu dynasty, and by so doing, he removed the burden of the world.
ततो कलो संप्रवर्ते समोहाय सुर दिशा बुद्ध नामनांजन सुतः टीकाकेषु भविष्यति.
Then in the beginning of Kali Yuga, the Lord will appear as Lord Buddha, the son of Anjana, in the province of Gaya, just for the purpose of deluding those who are envious of the faithful theists.
अथासो योग संज्ञायां दस्य प्रायेषु राजसु जनिता विष्णु यस्य सो नामना कल्कि जगत्पतिः.
Thereafter, at the conjunction of two yugas, the Lord of creation will take his birth as Kalki incarnation and become the son of Vishnu Yasa. At this time, almost all the rulers of the earth will have degenerated into plunderers.
अवतारी संख्यया हरे सत्व निधे द्विजाः यथा विदासिनः कुल्याः सरसस्यूय सह.
O Brahmanas, the incarnations of the Lord are innumerable, like rivulets flowing inexhaustible sources of water.
रसोय मनो देवा मनुपुत्रमः जुचसः कला सर्वे हरे एव सप्रजापतयः समर्थुः.
All the rishis, Manus, demigods, and descendants of Manu, who are especially powerful, are plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. This also includes the Prajapatis.
एते चांस कला पुंसा कृष्णस्तु भगवान् स्वयं इंद्रारि व्याकुलं लोकं मुद्यन्ति युगे युगे.
All of the above mentioned incarnations are either plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord, but Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets whenever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. The Lord incarnates to protect the theists.
जन्म वयं भगवतो ये तत् प्रयतो नरः शायं प्राप्त घृणं भक्त्या दुःख ग्राम विमुच्यते.
Whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearances of the Lord with devotion in the morning and in the evening gets relief from all miseries of life.
एतद् रूपं भगवतो हि अरूपस्य चिद् आत्मनः माया गुणे विराचितं मादाधिपि आत्मनि.
The conception of the Virat universal form of the Lord as appearing in the material world is imaginary. It is to enable the less intelligent and neophytes to adjust to the idea of the Lord's having form, but factually the Lord has no material form.
यथा नामसि मेघो रेणु वा पार्थिवो नीले एवं दृष्टरि दृश्यतम् आरोपितम् अबुद्धिभिः.
Clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, they also implant material bodily conceptions on the spirit's self.
अथ परं य अव्यक्तम् अविद्य गुणबृहिमितम् अदृष्टारुस्त्र वस्तुत्वात् सजीवो य पुनः भवः.
Beyond this gross conception of form is another subtle conception of form, which is without formal shape and is unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. The living being has his form beyond this subtlety, otherwise, he could not have repeated births.
यत्र मे सद असद्रूपे प्रतिसिद्धे स्वसमद्विदा अविद्यात्मनि कृते इत्तद् ब्रह्म दर्शनम्.
Whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as the Lord.
यदि एषो परा ता देवी माया वैशारतिमति संपन्न एवति विदु महिम्नि स्वे महीयते.
If the illusory energy subsides and the living entity becomes fully enriched with knowledge by the grace of the Lord, then he becomes at once enlightened with self-realization and thus becomes situated in his own glory.
एवं जन्मनि कर्माणि हि अकुर्तुर् अज्ञस्य च वर्ण्यन्ति स्म कवयो वेद गुह्यांति यरुते पतेः.
Thus, learned men describe the births and activities of the unborn and inactive, which is undiscoverable even in the Vedic literatures. He is the Lord of the heart.
स वा इदं विश्वम् अमोघ लीला शुजति अति न सज्जतेऽस्मि भूतेषु चन्तरिहित आत्मा तन्त्रः सद्वर्गीतं जिघ्रहति सद्गुणेशः.
The Lord, whose activities are always spotless, is the master of the six senses and is fully omnipotent with six opulences. He creates the manifested universes, maintains them, and annihilates them without being in the least affected. He is within every living being and is always independent.
न शास्य कश्चिन् निपुणेन धातु अव्यते जन्तु कुमानिश्वसुति नामानि रूपाणि मनोवचोभिः सन्तो वतो नतो चार्यम् इव जग्नः.
The foolish with a poor fund of knowledge cannot know the transcendental nature of the forms, names, and activities of the Lord, who is playing like an actor in a drama. Nor can they express such things, neither in their speculations nor in their words.
स वेदा धातु पद्वावें परस्य दुरन्त वीरस्य रथान्गत पनेह यो मया या सन्ततया नानुवृत्ताय भजते तत्पासरोज गन्धम.
Only those who render unreserved, uninterrupted, favorable service unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who carries the wheel of the chariot in his hand, can know the creator of the universe in his full glory, power, and transcendence.
अथे धन्या भगवन्त इतं यद् वासुदेव किल लोके नाथे कुर्वन्ति सर्वात्मकम् आत्मा भावं न यत्र भूय परिवर्तत उग्रः.
Only by making such inquiries in this world can one be successful and perfectly cognizant. For such inquiries invoke transcendental ecstatic love unto the personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of all universes and guarantee 100% immunity from the dreadful repetition of birth and death.
इदं भगवतं नाम पुर्यानं ब्रह्म संहितम् उत्तम श्लोक चरितं चखात् भगवान् ऋषि नियश्रेयस्यास्य लोकस्य धन्यं स्वस्ति अनियं महत्.
This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good for all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect.
तदितं ग्राह्यम् आस सुत आत्मवतां वरं सववेदि तीर्थस्थानं शारं समुद्रतम्.
Sri Vyasadeva delivered it to his son, who is the most respected among the realized after extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures and histories of the universe.
Satu samshisha vayam asha Maharajam parishiktamam prayo pavistam gangyayam paritam parmashibhihi.
Sukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, in his turn delivered the Bhagavatam to the great emperor Parikshit, who sat surrounded by sages on the bank of Ganges, awaiting death without taking food or drink.
Krishnesa dhamo pakate dharma gnana divishaha kalo nasta drusham esa punanarko dunoditaha.
This Bhagavata Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from the Purana.
Tata kitayata viprashe bhuri tejasa chadya gamam tatra nivisattat anugrahat soham va shravyayashyami yata dhitam yata mati.
O learned Brahmana, when Sukadeva Goswami recited Bhagavatam there in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus by his mercy I learned the Bhagavatam from the great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned it from him and as I have realized it. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Sorry
Thank
if
you,
I
Hare
made
Krishna.
mistakes.
Sorry as well for any mistakes I made.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much. That was very nice. Okay, so as you may have seen on the group for the topic for today, we're basically just going to complete what we did last Sunday, where we looked at Prahlad Maharaj's prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, and we got through just under half of them. Last time we did about 23 prayers, but there's still about 30 left. So we'll just pick up where we left off and continue from there. And we'll just do the Mangalacharan before that. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna. I'll just share presentation on the screen. Okay, so as I said, we covered 23 of Prahlada Maharaj's prayers, so we're going to start from 24, which is, in terms of the verses, it is Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 31. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, so just to explain what we're doing, if those of you who are here who weren't here last Sunday, basically we're looking at each of the prayers from Prahlada Maharaj to Lord Nrsingadev, which have been written in the Bhagavatam. And basically what you'll see on the slides is not the actual translation, but it's basically the lesson we can learn from that verse, either based just on the translation as it is, or based on the explanation given by Srila Prabhupada in the purport of what we can take away from that verse. And so just to recap, the previous verse was saying that whatever exists, both externally and internally, is the Lord alone, since the entire cosmic manifestation is simply an expansion of his energy. So then this first prayer that we're covering today is kind of continuing from that theme. So what we can learn from this prayer is that the conception of mine and yours is a type of illusion, because everything is an emanation from the Lord and is therefore not different from him. So we can see everything, we know from Krishna's statement in the Bhagavad Gita that everything, both spiritual and material, emanates from Krishna. Everything comes from Krishna. So to have this conception that, oh, this is mine, this is yours, and have that distinction, that difference, that is actually an illusion, because ultimately everything comes from Krishna, everything belongs to Krishna. So ultimately there is no such distinction, there is no such difference. And if we go back to what Prahlada Maharaj himself said to his father before Nrsingadev's appearance, when Prahlada Maharaj, this 5-year-old boy, is trying to instruct his father, who is at that time the conqueror of the whole universe. And here is this little boy trying to give instructions to him. And he's basically saying to his father that, he has, similar to this mine and yours, his father has a conception of friends and enemies. He sees certain persons, certain personalities as his enemies, which is ultimately, according in his mind, Vishnu is his enemy, the devotees are his enemy. Anyone who is opposed to him, anyone who is performing pious activities, or anyone who is a brahmana, he considers all of these people to be his enemy, and he considers others of a similar demoniac mentality. He considers them to be his friends. But this is a kind of illusion, and Prahlada Maharaj is basically saying that someone on the spiritual platform sees how everyone is equal and doesn't make this distinction between friends and enemies. But obviously we know what happened. We know that he didn't take his son's advice. Anyway, the next prayer, what we can learn from that is the Lord is always in a transcendental state, beyond the creation of the material world, and is always in transcendental bliss. So again, we hear that, as we've heard in the previous prayers, how the whole material world is created not by the Lord personally. Krishna himself doesn't personally come, but through his energies, he just simply desires the creation of the material world, and it happens by the material energy. But he is always still there in Goloka Vrindavan, transcendental to the material world. He doesn't directly touch it. He is completely uncontaminated by it because he is the master of it. And regardless of time, place, circumstance, at all times, the Lord is in transcendental bliss. He may be engaged in certain pastimes where it may seem, like there's something sad happening, there's some sorrowful pastime, there's some separation maybe, or the devotees are put into difficulties or whatever. There may be some seemingly sad situation where it may seem like the Lord is unhappy, but ultimately this is different kind of, he's experiencing spiritual emotions which are always blissful. So even though whatever the external appearance might be, he is always in transcendental bliss. In the next prayer, both the material world and spiritual world are considered to be the body of the Supreme Lord. So again, just making this same point, that in one sense, the Lord's creation is different from him, but at the same time, it's the same. So here it's explained in this way, that it's the body of the Supreme Lord. Just like the whole universal creation, so that we can, so that those who are still on materialistic platforms, so that they can understand the universe and the creation, then we have the whole appearance of the universe, or the vision of the universal form, as explained in the Bhagavad Gita, where it's as if this whole universe and everything in it is the body of the Supreme Lord. And then here it's saying also the spiritual world is considered to be the body of the Supreme Lord. So one way we can think about that is also ultimately everything in the spiritual world, the whole Dham, Goloka Vrindavan, it said the Dham itself is Balaram, ultimately. It's a manifestation of Balaram. All Krishna's paraphernalia is a manifestation of Balaram. So in this way, it is all part of the Supreme Lord, because we know Krishna and Balaram are ultimately the same Supreme Personality of Godhead, just slightly different roles and different complexion. So then the next prayer is, okay, so once the cosmic creation is manifested, we then cannot perceive the cause of that manifestation. But we can understand from the Vedic scriptures that the cause is the Lord. So we see, we see the whole universe around us. We see all the Lord's creation around us, but it's not immediately obvious what has caused, everything we see around us. What is the actual cause of it? We can't immediately perceive that. So Prahlada Maharaj gives the example in this verse, text 34. He gives the example of a seed. So, once a seed has germinated and then grown into a plant, then the original seed, you can no longer see it, isn't it? We can just see the plant now, but the seed that was originally there is no longer visible. So similarly, now that this universe has already been manifested, we cannot see the seed or the cause. But then we can have faith from the Vedic scriptures. So Srila Prabhupada talks about this in the purport of this verse, that from the Vedic scriptures, we can understand the cause of all causes is Krishna, the Supreme Lord. As we also know from Brahma Samhita, that Krishna is ultimately the cause of all causes. And here again, it's the same point. Supreme Lord, who is the cause of all causes, is existing everywhere. And now, slightly different topic, that genuine self-realization means to see the transcendental form of the Lord face to face. And we can see how Prahlad Maharaj was fortunate enough to be in this position where he actually saw the form of the Lord in the form of Nrsimhadev face to face. And not only that, what are we reading right now? He's actually offering prayers face to face to the Lord. He is also taken, Lord Nrsimhadev takes him on his own lap. We had at the beginning, before he's offering prayers, the Lord touches him on his head. The Lord is garlanding him. So many things, how fortunate he is. So this is the actual self-realization. This is you can say the perfection of self-realization. And ultimately, this is our ultimate end, is that we will also, if we stay on this process, by the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, we can also one day see the transcendental form of the Lord face to face. Obviously, we hear many times, pure devotee, they don't even have desire to see the Lord face to face. They're just happy to see the Lord's feet or serve the lotus feet of the Lord. They don't have that desire, but Krishna gives them that mercy anyway. He allows them to see him. He gives his darshan to them. So now, whenever the Lord incarnates, he appears in his original transcendental form. This is Srila Prabhupada's own words. In the purport, he says his original transcendental form. And then in the translation itself says this part, that the form is untinged by material qualities. So we know that we covered it before. I think there was a previous prayer from Prahlada Maharaj where he's talking how on one hand, we are all under the influence, under the control of the three modes of material nature, but the Lord is completely untouched, uncontaminated. Rather, he is the controller of the material modes. So again, it's saying the form of the Lord itself is also untinged by the material modes. And so we can see here that so all of the incarnations are transcendental. They're not material in any way. So obviously we're hearing about Nrsimhadev, but in this particular verse, Prahlada Maharaj mentions a different incarnation of the Lord, Hayagriva, the horse-headed incarnation of the Lord, there was two great demons, Madhu demon and also a demon called Kaitaba. And Hayagriva, he slew these two demons, and therefore that is how the Lord got the name Madhusudan. So that's why we don't see this pastime in 10th canto in Krishna's pastimes, because it's actually, although Krishna himself, the devotees are calling him Madhusudan, even Arjun in Bhagavad Gita is calling him Madhusudan, but actually it wasn't when he was there as Krishna, but when he appeared as Hayagriva, that he actually killed the Madhu demon and Kaitava demon. And also we have this in the famous bhajan Vibhavari Shesha. It mentions at one point it says Madhusudana. He refers to the Lord as Madhusudana, the killer of the Madhu demon. Then later it says Kaitava Shatana, again the killer of Kaitava. So this is referring to Hayagriva. But whatever form it is, Hayagriva, Nrsimhadev, they're all transcendental. So why does the Lord appear in these incarnations? To maintain the entire creation and to protect the principles of religion. So we heard this many times from Bhagavad Gita. Then, if we wish to understand the Lord and his activities, we need to free our sinful minds from the contamination of the material world. So there's so much rubbish, you could say, in our minds, which prevents us from really understanding the Lord and his activities. We can hear at any point. It's not that we have to wait till we're purified to hear about these things, but we can only truly understand. It can only really truly touch the heart in a meaningful way if we remove this contamination from our minds and, stop engaging in sinful activities. Then we can actually understand these things properly. Just thinking of how Srila Prabhupada, often say, someone would say that this is, this propagation of Krishna consciousness, this preaching, this is brainwashing. So Srila Prabhupada would say, half joking, he would say that, yes, we are washing their brains. We are purifying them in that way. So he was, brainwashing has that obviously negative connotation, but he was not twisting it, but turning it on its head and explaining it in a positive way. This is just one example. We all know how Srila Prabhupada had a wonderful way with words. So yeah, that just came to mind when I was reading this. So further to that same point, we need to restrict the activities of the senses. Without such restraint, we cannot make advancement in Krishna consciousness. So yes, it's basically the same point there, that we can't just give our senses full freedom, just like that example, but that analogy of how the senses are like these horses pulling a chariot. But we cannot just allow the horses to pull the chariot everywhere and anywhere. We have to use the reins to restrain the horses and direct them in a certain way. So in the same way, we need to restrict the activities of the senses. And now in this verse, in this prayer, Prahlada Maharaj is praying. Again, he's showing many times that how he's not worried about himself, but he's always worried for others. He's always concerned for others. And he's praying to Nishingadev to free others from these miseries of repeated birth and death. So similarly, appealing to the Lord's compassionate nature, we can pray in the same way. And then then it said that the Supreme Lord is very favorable to devotees who serve his own pure devotee. So we should aspire to be a servant of his servant. So again, this point that Srila Prabhupada likes to make, that the more we become the servant of the servant of the servant, the more further down we go. Actually, that's actually a higher position. We are actually making more advancement. That is the most desirable position for us, is to be the servant of the servant, the servant of the servant. But it's not that, because it's not that, if you're so far removed, because it's, ultimately servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. But it's not that if we're so far removed from Krishna and we're not serving him directly, it's not that we won't be satisfied. It's not that we won't be blissful. None of that. This is all on the transcendental platform. So whether that we're directly servant of Krishna or servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, we won't be dissatisfied. We won't be unhappy. We will be fully joyful in our service, in our constitutional position, in whatever way we are serving Krishna. Okay, now the devotees of the Lord feel happiness and transcendental bliss because of their being Krishna conscious, but they feel great unhappiness for those who make doomed plans to be happy in this material world. This is based on the purport of Srila Prabhupada on this prayer. But the Prahlada Maharaj is basically saying that he's simply filled with concern, he's filled with compassion for those who are making plans to be happy in this material world, because he knows that such plans are in vain, they're futile, they're not going to achieve that happiness, because happiness, real happiness is not found in the material world, it's found on the spiritual platform. So because of that, because the Vaishnava feels the sorrow of others, the unhappiness of others as his own, so therefore Prahlada Maharaj, who is a pure Vaishnava, he also feels unhappy because of their unhappiness, and he simply wants to bring them back to Krishna so that they can be happy. Next, a pure devotee does not desire their own liberation, but wishes for others to be delivered. So this is continuing on from the previous one, this point about compassion. And Prahlada Maharaj is saying in this prayer, he's talking about, there are many transcendentalists, many spiritualists who go to the Himalayas, who go to a secluded place to meditate and attempt to achieve their own liberation. And sometimes, they take up vows of silence. Prahlada Maharaj mentions in the verse. But he says they don't have any concern for others. They go away to the Himalayas, but what about everyone else in the towns and cities? So Prahlada Maharaj in this verse, he's saying that I don't want to be liberated. I don't want to be delivered, forgetting all these other conditioned souls in the towns and cities and everywhere else. I want to deliver them also. And then next he says, he's teaching us that engaging in the Lord's service gives us the spiritual strength to tolerate the desire for sex life, thus saving us from a lot of suffering. So it mentions how, and we hear often that this is the most entangling thing. This is the thing that entangles us most in the material world. It's sex life. And we know that, it ultimately leads to suffering, because it's actually explained in this verse that it's like an itch. And we know if you itch, you get a relief for maybe a few seconds, maybe a minute, then it starts becoming itchy again, and we have to do again like that. Ultimately, it's not pleasure, it's suffering. Like we mentioned last week, this material happiness is actually just absence of suffering. So we have that itch, and then we itch it, and then the suffering goes away for a little while, just a very temporary absence, then it comes back. So that's not actually happiness. That absence of suffering in between, that is not actually happiness. So if we try to, like we know, if we resist the urge to itch, then we won't get that further suffering. So in the same way, we tolerate this sex life, then gradually over time, that itch is reduced, and then we're not so much compelled by that desire. It doesn't have such a strong hold on us. And how do we do that? Because ultimately, not ultimately, but otherwise, if we don't engage in Lord's service, then we know it's very difficult to tolerate these material desires. So how do we do it? Engaging in the Lord's service. And basically, this gives us that spiritual strength, which ultimately has its source in Lord Balaram or Nityananda Prabhu. And actually, that's a good point, because when we finish this presentation around 8:40, we'll have a bhajan. Bhajan is called Dhanamora Nityananda. So it mentions various personalities, including Nityananda Prabhu. So it is quite relevant here. Nityananda Prabhu or Balaram, well, the same personality, they are the source of spiritual strength. So engaging in the Lord's service, we can develop that spiritual strength. And once we become more strong in our spiritual life, more fixed up, then, as I said, this desire won't have such a great hold on us. Then, Prahlada Maharaj mentions 10 different methods, described in the Vedas for attaining liberation. And basically what he's implying, now he mentions these, but then basically he's implying that actually devotion is better than any of these. Devotional service is better than any of these. And then Srila Prabhupada explicitly makes that point in the purport. He's comparing devotional service to these other 10 methods. And we won't go into all of those 10 methods, we don't have time, but we don't really need to anyway. We have devotional service, and Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, that is much more powerful than all of these things. We know as well, devotional service is direct way, it's much more direct. We're directly approaching Krishna rather than going through other methods and going through a roundabout way. We're going straight to the source, directly to Krishna. And also like our main activity in devotional service that we perform, chanting, is direct communication with Krishna. Immediately you're chanting Krishna's names, immediately you're connecting with Krishna. It's direct, it's very powerful. Okay, so then I'll have to speed up a bit, but only by devotional service can we understand how the Supreme Lord is the original cause and effect of everything. So a few prayers before, we heard how we see the universal manifestation around us, we cannot perceive immediately what is the cause of this. We can't understand it. But then through devotional service, then we can understand it. Okay, actually Krishna, he's the original cause and effect of everything. Again, very similar point that we covered already. Through his all-pervasive energy, the Lord exists everywhere at once. Then, but Srila Prabhupada makes a distinction in the purport that he also has his personal form, but this personal form is only visible to his devotees. Unless we're performing devotional service, we cannot see that personal form. So Srila Prabhupada says again and again in his classes, if you come in a challenging mood, you say, show me God. I don't believe there's a God. I only trust what I see with my own eyes. So show me God. And then Srila Prabhupada says, he says, you rascal, do you even have the eyes to see Krishna? You don't even have the vision to see Krishna. So how can you see him? You're not yet qualified to see Krishna. How do we become qualified for devotional service? Being Krishna's devotee, then we can see him. Otherwise, there's no possibility. So we shouldn't come in a challenging mood like that, but we should come in a humble, submissive mood, trying to render devotional service. Then we will touch the Lord's heart. Obviously, coming in that arrogant, challenging mood, you're not going to melt Krishna's heart. So then by engaging in devotional service, we can understand the Lord in truth. And again, in the purport, Prabhupada says that all other processes that do not result in this understanding, that, if we follow other processes, if at the end of it, we don't understand Krishna, if we don't know Krishna, then that all our efforts there were useless. Because the whole point of everything, the whole point of the Vedas is to know Krishna. So if we don't understand Krishna at the end of it, then what was the whole point of that? So here the point is we should then obviously focus on devotional service, because then at the end of it, we will understand the Lord in truth. And so devotional service is the only successful method for going back home, back to Godhead. It's, self-explanatory now, because we covered this point so many times. There are a few more prayers in the next chapter, chapter 10. But just before that, this is towards the end of chapter 9, where it is described that thus Lord Nrsimhadev was pacified by the devotee Prahlada Maharaj with prayers offered from the transcendental platform. The Lord gave up his anger, and being very kind to Prahlad, who was offering prostrated obeisances, he spoke as follows: "My dear Prahlad, most gentle one, best of the family of the Asuras, all good fortune unto you. I am very much pleased with you. It is my pastime to fulfill the desires of all living beings, and therefore you may ask from me any benediction that you desire to be fulfilled." So now there's just a few more prayers from Prahlada Maharaj in the 10th chapter. So here in the second text of chapter 10, Prahlada Maharaj is saying that devotee, well, Prahlada Maharaj himself is praying, he's saying that I am very much afraid of the material energy, and therefore I wish to take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. So what the lesson we can learn is any devotee, not just Prahlada Maharaj, we should be afraid of associating with material energy. We should desire to be liberated from materialistic life, and thus, in order to achieve that, we should take shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. So, what this point about being afraid of the material energy means, like Srila Prabhupada, I don't know if I mentioned it last week, but Srila Prabhupada was, once quoted that he says that my disciples are not sufficiently afraid of Maya. So we should be afraid in the sense that we should understand how dangerous Maya is, and we should not give her any opportunity. As we hear on another occasion, if you give Maya an inch, you will take a mile. So in that sense, we have to be very, what's the word? Instead of afraid, you can say maybe very cautious. Yeah. And this point about desiring to be liberated, because obviously we hear a devotee is not desiring liberation. This is not liberation. We don't want to be in this materialistic life. We want to lead a devotional life, spiritual life. We want to act. We want to live for Krishna. In that sense, so we're taking shelter of his lotus feet, and we can think, I no longer want to simply, live this life of sense gratification, this materialistic life. Instead, I want to now serve Krishna, because now I finally understood all these other things that cannot give me happiness. This is actually what I should be doing with my life. And then, following the orders of the Supreme Lord, the pure devotee comes to this material world to show by their personal behavior how we can also become pure devotees. So Prahlada Maharaj is basically saying this verse, that he's just, he's come to this material world by the Lord's desire. And then what we can learn from this, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, we can understand by their personal behavior, from their example. If we're following their example, we can also become pure devotees. It's not that just these eternally liberated souls from the spiritual world, they are pure devotees, and we can never, being here in the material world, we can never become pure devotees. No, it's not like that at all. We can also become pure devotees if we follow the example. In other places we hear in the Bhagavatam, we should follow the example of the Mahajans, great devotees of the Lord. Okay, then a person who desires some material benefit in exchange for performing devotional service is not a pure devotee. So we understand that, devotee is not doing it for any material gain. They're just doing it ultimately out of love. That's the only reason they're doing it for Krishna. They're not asking for anything in return. Okay, so a devotee who has no materialistic motives is a pure servant, and the Lord, who does not unnecessarily bestow benedictions upon his servant simply to keep his own prestigious position, is a pure master. So the first half is the same point as the previous prayer, that a pure devotee or pure servant, they have no materialistic motives. But now it's also saying the Lord is a pure master because he does not give benedictions or give blessings or give things to his devotees just to keep his own position. And this is contrasted by Srila Prabhupada with the demigods in this purport. It's like with the demigods, it's just like a sort of system, automatic system in a way. You do the required austerities and penances or yagyas or whatever it might be in order to get that demigod's mercy, and then the demigod, they bestow their benedictions on you without really considering what will happen after, what will you do with it. And we can see what happens, I mean, from this pastime itself, how Lord Brahma gave benedictions to Hiranyakashipu, and we can see what he did with these benedictions. And later, the Nishingadev tells or warns Brahma that you should never again give such benedictions to demoniac personalities, because obviously they're going to use it for demoniac purposes. So he's basically chastising Lord Brahma in a way. Okay, I'll have to speed up even more. So next prayer, what we can learn from that is that the natural relationship between us and the Supreme Lord is that of servant and master. And only by being established in that relationship can we experience real happiness. And then, so now, up until this point, Prahlada Maharaj has been rejecting any benedictions. He's saying to the Lord, I don't want anything from you. I've not done this. It's not like a material transaction. I've not done it for that reason. I've just simply done it out of devotion. But then he says, if you really want to give me any benediction, then please give me this benediction that there be no material desires within the core of my heart. So ultimately, this is the only benediction that a devotee actually prays for, that there be no material desires within their heart. So if there's no material desires, that implies that, because it's impossible to have no desires, be desireless, as it says in Bhagavad Gita. So if there's no material desires, by extension, that means spiritual desires instead. And what is a spiritual desire? To serve Krishna. So ultimately, the only thing we pray for, as we know, is to be engaged in the Lord's devotional service. We understand this is the meaning of chanting Hare Krishna as well. Please engage me in your devotional service. Okay, now, when we try to fulfill our insatiable lusty desires, our senses, mind, life, body, religion, patience, intelligence, shyness, opulence, strength, memory, and truthfulness are all deviated from their original function. In other words, they cannot be properly used for the satisfaction of the Lord. So of course, we don't have time to explain all of these, but basically, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, he describes all these things as the paraphernalia of our life. He says these are all deviated from the original function, because ultimately what they're meant to be used for Krishna. So we can see such a great effect it has on all these different things. So many different things are all affected if we simply, if we're only trying to fulfill our lusty desires, if we simply allow them to control our lives, then all of these things are affected in a very negative way. So it's a very nice, very powerful reminder for us. Okay, so there's only three left. So devotee who has given up all material desires becomes eligible to possess opulence equal to that of the Lord, despite having no desire for such opulence. So again, devotee has no desire for anything like that, but the Lord, out of his mercy, he gives it to them anyway. If the Lord knows that we're not going to use it for any material purpose, we're going to use it for a spiritual purpose, then he'll give it to us. If we're still on the materialistic platform, then obviously he's not going to give it to us because we're not going to use it for devotional service. But once we have no material desires, if we have no desire for opulence, we get the highest opulence. It's a very interesting point there. And following on from that, although the pure devotees as opulent as the Lord, they never consider themselves to be equal to him. Instead, they're offering respectful obeisances unto him. In this verse, Prahlada Maharaj is saying, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, unto Lord Nrsimhadev. And then, so that was text 10, and then a few texts later, Srila Prabhupada puts these verses together, 15 to 17. He translates them together as, first of all, in this verse, in the prayer itself, Prahlada Maharaj is, we all know the famous prayer where he is asking for the Lord to bestow his mercy on his father, on his demonic father, Hiranyakashipu. Despite everything he did, despite trying to kill him so many times, still, he is asking the Lord to please be merciful on my father. And then we know Lord Nrsimhadev says, because of you, he's already liberated. So don't worry about that. And so many generations before and after are already liberated. So don't worry about that. Well, what can we learn from this? That because devotees like Prahlada Maharaj, they're situated on the spiritual platform, they are the well-wishers of everyone. Thus, they may even petition the Lord to bestow his mercy upon those who have wronged them. So obviously his father has wronged him in the greatest way because he's tried to kill him in so many different ways. But still, he is begging the Lord to give his mercy to him. Because he is on the spiritual platform. If on the materialistic platform, it's not possible for us to wish good, to wish well upon these people who have treated us in this way. Obviously, if we're on a materialistic platform, we're never going to ask for them to be, for them to receive the Lord's mercy. We will just, why should we do anything for them? They've treated me in this way, so why should I do anything for them? That's the materialistic platform, but devotees on the spiritual platform. So regardless of how he was treated, he still wishes well on his father. So ultimately, you say that's the most, from Prahlada Maharaj's prayers, that's the most powerful demonstration of his compassion, that someone who's tried to kill him so many times, he's still, compassionate upon him. I mean, such an incredible example. But just to conclude, so that is all the prayers, because of how Srila Prabhupada has translated these three texts together. So if we count it like that, there's 53 prayers of Prahlada Maharaj. But I was just to finish, I was in a Sangha the other week with Kartik Chandra Prabhu, and he was describing, I think it was Kartik Chandra Prabhu, where he mentioned, the essence of Prahlada Maharaj's prayers is, if we go back, is this one. Chapter 10, text 7. The essence of all Prahlada Maharaj's prayers is where he says that, I have no desire for any benedictions, but if you must give me something, then I simply pray that there be no material desires within my heart. So that's, we can see that as the essence of all these prayers. That so many different things, but ultimately the only thing we're praying for is to have no material desires, and by extension, instead, what do we want? To serve the Lord. So that is the end of Prahlada Maharaj's prayers. And does anyone have anything they'd like to say, any questions or corrections or reflections, anything? not, then we can move on to the bhajan because we're about 10 minutes late. Anyway, I'm sorry for that. No? Okay. So are the devotees who will be doing the bhajan, are they ready?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Sure. Okay. So I can share the bhajan on the screen. And can you just confirm this is the right bhajan, right?
Yes.
Okay. So are we starting with the translation or
The translation first.
okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, my humble obeisance to all of you. Translation. Lord Nityananda is my wealth. Lord Gaurachandra is my master. The youthful divine couple is my life. Advaita Acharya is my strength. Gadadhara is my family. Narhari Sarakara is my glory. The dust of the devotees' lotus feet is my bathing water. The chanting of the devotees' names is my satisfaction. Considering the merits of all Vedic literatures in the light of devotional service, I have concluded that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the best of all scriptures. My mind is firmly convinced of the spiritual benefit obtained by eating the remnants of foodstuff left by the devotees. The names of the devotees are my happiness. The land of Vrindavana is the enclosure within which I keep my mind. Poor-hearted Narottama Dasa speaks in this way. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Thank you, Namrata Mataji. Harsha Mataji, please go ahead. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Can you just scroll down? Thank you. Hare Krishna. Dhanamora Nityananda Pati Mora Gaura Chandra Prana Mora Yugala Kishora Advaita Achara Bala Gadadara Mora Kula Narahari Vilasi Mora Dhanamora Nityananda Vaishnavara Padaduli Tahe Mora Snana Keli Darpan Mora Vaishnavera Nama Vichara Kariye Mane Bhakti Rasa Aswadane Madhyastha Shri Bhagavata Purana Vaishnavera Uchishta Tahe Mora Mane Nishta Vaishnavera Namate Ulasa Vrindavana Chabutara Tahe Mora Mane Gera Kohe Dina Narottama Dasa Dhanamora Nityananda Pati Mora Gaura Chandra Prana Mora Yugala Kishora Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Dhanamura Nityananda Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, that was so lovely. Thank you so much, Mataji. Okay, so now we've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much for joining again. And thank you for Divyanam, to Divyanam Prabhu and the other devotees who organized these sanghas to give me the opportunity to continue with the prayers of Prahlada Maharaj that we covered last week. Yeah, I feel very fortunate that I got to, do a class do a class on Nishinga Chaturdashi, and then, continue covering these beautiful prayers. So if we feel inspired, please, in your own time, please also have a look at these prayers and read them. They're so powerful. The words of a pure devotee are so powerful. Okay, so Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhu
evacha
patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindaki.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.